What's going on, everyone? Charlie here. We have another filing to talk about. This one is a share repurchase disclosure modernization ruling that's coming out of the SEC. This is part of the CFR, Code of Federal Regulations. This is a pretty big one. Basically, this is the filing here. It was filed on the 15th, or it's scheduled to be published on the 15th. It was actually filed today. So this is 17 CFR Parts 229, 232, 240, 249, and 274. The summary. The SEC is proposing amendments to modernize and improve disclosure about repurchases of an issuer's equity securities that are registered under the Securities Exchange Act of 1934. So the issuers are going to be like your foreign ADR issuers, your prospectus issuing from the banks, mainly involving big banks, their prospectuses, and especially foreign issuing when it comes to repurchasing their own securities. Now, they go in detail about different practices that are used to beat the system and game the system regarding share repurchases from corporate institutions, but we're going to go ahead and look into this and see what they're changing and what it's going to impact. So basically, the proposed amendments would require an issuer to provide more timely disclosure on a new Form SR, which is a new form that we're going to go over in a second that they're proposing, regarding purchases of its equity securities for each day that it or an affiliated purchaser makes a share purchase. This proposed amendments would also enhance the existing periodic disclosure requirements about these purchases. So basically, they want to know what's going on. They want to know more details about what's going on with these issuers, why are they selling shares, and for what purpose. And they want more reporting information disclosed. Introduction. We are proposing changes to the requirements for disclosure of purchases of equity securities made by or on behalf of an issuer or any affiliated purchaser. Issuers may repurchase their shares through, among other means, open market purchases, tender offers, private negotiated transactions, and accelerated share repurchases. Issuers typically disclose repurchase plans or programs at the time that the share repurchases are authorized by the board of directors. Most share repurchases are executed over time through open market purchases, through such market share repurchase plans or programs. Issuers are not required to, and typically do not, disclose the specific dates on which they will execute trades pursuant to an announced repurchase plan or program. Investors and other market participants normally do not become aware of an issuer's actual share repurchase-related trading activity until they are reported in an issuer's periodic reports, long after the trades have been executed. The proposed amendments are intended to improve the quality, relevance, and timeliness of information related to issuer share repurchases. This proposal results from an ongoing, comprehensive evaluation of our disclosure requirements. As part of this evaluation in April 2016, the Commission issued a concept release on the business and financial decisions, or on financial disclosure required by Regulation SK, including disclosure pursuant to Item 703. Now, the proposal. The proposed amendments would require more detailed and more frequent disclosure about issuer share repurchases and require issuers to present the disclosure using a structured data language which could allow investors to better understand the extent of an issuer's activity in the market, including potential impacts on the issuer's share price, better understand an issuer's motivation for its share repurchases and how it is executing its purchase plan, and gain potential insight into any relationship between the share repurchases and executive compensation and stock sales. China! Anyways, discussion of the proposed amendments. We are proposing to modernize and improve the disclosure required about repurchases of an issuer's equity securities by requiring daily repurchase disclosure on a new Form SR, which would be furnished to the Commission 1 business day after execution of an issuer's share repurchase order. Amending Item 703 to require additional detail regarding the structure of an issuer's repurchase program and its share repurchases, and requiring information disclosed pursuant to Item 703 of Regulation SK and pursuant to Form SR to be reported using a structured data language, specifically inline extensible business reporting language, or inline XBRL. Now, the proposed Form SR that they're talking about. We are proposing new Exchange Act Rule 13A-21 and Form SR that would require an issuer, including a foreign private issuer and certain registry closed-end funds, to report any purchase made by or on behalf of the issuer or any affiliated purchaser of shares or other units of any class of the issuer's equity securities that is registered by the issuer pursuant to the Exchange Act Section 12.22. The issuer would have to furnish a new Form SR before the end of the first business day following the day on which the issuer executes a share repurchase. This could potentially bring to light a lot of underground crime that's going on. There's a lot of this going on in these issuers. So this is actually a good filing. And this is important, by the way. The super note here, execution has a commonly understood meaning consistent with the Commission's explanation and interpretation of Section 206, Section 3 of the Investment Advisors Act of 1940. Basically, that the ending point of a transaction is when the actual exchange of securities and payment occurs, which is known as settlement. This is the crux of the issue in the market. There's no settlement happening. So the proposed Form SR would require the following disclosure in tabular format by date for each class or series of securities. 1. Identification of the class of securities purchased. 2. The total number of shares or units purchased, including all issuer repurchases, whether or not made pursuant to publicly announced plans or programs. The average price paid per share or unit. The aggregate total number of shares or units purchased on the open market. The aggregate total number of shares or units purchased in reliance on the safe harbor in 17 CFR 240.10b-18 or Rule 10b-18. And lastly, the aggregate total number of shares or units purchased pursuant to a plan that is intended to satisfy the affirmative defense conditions of Rule 10b5-1, paragraph C. So the reasoning for the proposed Form SR. While we continue to believe that the existing Item 703 requirements provide useful information, we believe that proposed Form SR could enhance transparency and enable more timely investor review of issuer share repurchases. Proposed Form SR would require issuer share repurchases to be reported on a daily basis before the end of the first business day, following the day on which the repurchase transaction has been executed. Investors could use this more detailed and timely disclosure to monitor and evaluate issuer share repurchases and their effects on the market for the issuer's securities. Now, the second proposal here, the revisions to Item 703, Form 20-F and Form NCSR, we are proposing to revise and expand the disclosure requirements in Item 703, Form 20-F, and Form NSCR, or NSCR, yes, NCSR, to work in conjunction with proposed Form SR to provide investors with more detailed and timely information that they can use to evaluate issuer share repurchases. We are proposing to revise Item 703 with corresponding changes to Form 20F and Form NCSR to require additional disclosures about the issuer's share repurchases. Specifically, we propose to require an issuer to disclose, number 1, the objective or rationale for its share repurchases and processes or criteria used to determine the amount of repurchases. You didn't ask this before? Good Lord. Any policies and procedures relating to purchase and sales of the issuer's securities by its officers and directors during a repurchase program, including any restriction on such transactions. And lastly, whether it made its repurchase pursuant to a plan that is intended to satisfy affirmative defense conditions of Rule 10b5-1, paragraph C, and if so, the date the plan was adopted or terminated. And then lastly, whether purchases were made in reliance on the 10b-18 rule, non-exclusive safe harbor. We're additionally proposing to require that issuers disclose if any of their officers or directors subject to reporting requirements under Section 16A of the Exchange Act purchased or sold shares or other units of the class of the issuer's equity securities that is the subject of an issuer's share purchase plan or program within 10 business days before or after the announcement of an issuer purchase plan or program by checking a box before the tabular disclosure of an issuer's purchases of equity securities. So in essence, the SEC is amending how issuers report share repurchases because they're oftentimes done in a manner that creates information asymmetry. And like we saw with Archegos fallout, they're spun off illegally to avoid margin calls. They're also amending Form 20F and Form NCSR to require additional disclosure about share purchases from issuers. Again, that's what it's about. They want to know what's going on, who's selling to who, they want to know why they're doing it, and they want a good reason for it because, again, this is likely due. The reason they're making this is because there's there's little oversight over these transactions, and it's likely due to the illegal spinoff of ADRs by foreign issuers almost 1 year ago to avoid margin calls from Archegos. Y'all have a good one.